Okay. Good afternoon, members, officers, anyone joining us online. My name is Councillor Jeff Harvey, and I'll be chairing the Climate and Environment Advisory Committee today. I wonder, to start off with, we could just give our names and positions. James, would you like to start off? We'll go around the sort of U-shape that way.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my name is James Rickson. I'm Joint Vice Chair.
I'm Councillor Martin Khan, member for Histon and Impington.
Councillor Ariel Khan, member of Torhaston and Cumberton Ward.
Councillor Peter Sanford, one of the members for Caxton and Papworth Ward.
John Cornell, Natural Environment Team Leader.
Rebecca Weymouth-Wood, Waste Policy and Climate Team Manager.
Grace Foden, I'm the new Climate Strategy Officer in the Climate and Environment Team. Ellie Haynes, Climate and Environment Development Officer, and we also have Karis here today, who's with us on work experience.
Okay. Councillor Bhattacharya? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Shobhana Bhattacharya, District Councillor of Camborne.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Lisa Redrop, and I'm also one of the joint chairs.
Okay, thank you very much. Also like to welcome Habs, our new officer, who's going to, he's actually prepared some excellent notes for me today, so thank you very much. First off, we have a request to reorder the agenda slightly, and I think that's because Ellie has to leave after presenting that. So the proposal is to bring agenda item 8 to the first substantive item. Is that okay? Can we agree that verbally? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Habs, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Dr. Toomey Hawkins, Councillor Bunty Waters and Councillor Paul Bearpark.
Okay, thank you. And of course, I should have mentioned that Councillor Natalie Warren-Green, I think I saw joining us remotely. Yeah, okay. I think a wave does it, so thank you very much. Do any members have any declarations of interest in relation to any item on the agenda? I think that's a no. And of course, if anything does occur to you during the course of the meeting, you can always raise it then. We've got two sets of minutes from previous meetings to approve today. So firstly, the meeting of the 18th of February this year. And I think if you remember, Councillor Bhattacharya felt that her very insightful comments on education around preparation of food, etc., hadn't been fully recorded in the draft minutes. So I wonder now if we could approve these corrected minutes. So is that okay? By agreement, we can approve those, and then a later set of minutes from the 1st of April, which we haven't seen before. Can I just go through those page by page then? So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7. So I take it that have your approval to sign both meetings off unless anyone objects. So thank you very much. Okay, yeah. Habs, do we have any public questions today?
We have no public questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So So now we come to Ellie's piece, which we brought forward, item 8. Ellie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out the proposed approach for responding to the Council's biodiversity duty. So as a local authority, we have a set of requirements under the Environment Act 2021, which includes a biodiversity duty. And in this report, we set out the timeline and proposed approach for reporting on the Council's biodiversity duty. So as part of this duty, local authorities must consider actions that further the general biodiversity objective and must determine policies and objectives as it considers appropriate and take action in light of these policies and objectives. So we've already taken a number of steps to set out our policy and to improve biodiversity within the district. The Council declared an ecological emergency in 2019 and in 2021 adopted its Doubling Nature strategy. And since then we've been setting and monitoring actions on protecting and enhancing biodiversity through the Zero Carbon Doubling Nature Action Plan, which is reported on an annual basis, and those reports are publicly available. We've also been discharging our duty on the requirements for biodiversity net gain, and in 2022 published the Greater Cambridge Biodiversity Supplementary Planning document. So we've got a number of requirements under the duty. So under the duty, we're required to publish a report, and that includes a summary of actions which we've taken since November 2021, and a summary of our plan for undertaking our work under the duty over the next 5 years, and also including anything else which might be of importance there. And it also, if requested, includes any quantitative data, but at present we haven't had any requests for the inclusion of that quantitative data. As we are a local planning authority, we also have a number of additional responsibilities, and that's to include information on discharging the biodiversity net gain as a planning condition, and providing information on actions resulting from or biodiversity net gain considerations which are set to be delivered under that, and any plans for carrying out these functions in the future. And we must publish 12 weeks. We must publish within 12 weeks of the reporting period end, which is the 1st of January. So the approach that we're proposing within this report is, well, we've already been tracking and responding on our actions through the Zero Carbon and Doubling Nature Action Plan. And the Natural Environment team have been monitoring and reporting on our against the biodiversity net gain requirements. We will gather this report with the help of the Built and Natural Environment team sort of on those biodiversity net gain reporting requirements. And so we plan to prepare this report in accordance with the timeline set out in the report, and that includes proposing to bring the report to the 25th of November Climate and Environment Advisory Committee. Just to note that we'll need to reconsider our biodiversity duty consideration within 5 years. And that will coincide with our plans for the climate and nature strategy. And finally, I'd just like to thank Kathy, who is our new Climate and Environment Project Officer, for her for writing this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So, members, we've got some recommendations here to firstly acknowledge our duty as South Cambridgeshire District Council to report on this, and that's A. B is to give comments on the proposed approach. Do we have any observations or comments, members? Councillor Martin Carr.
I just want to ensure that when you make the report, you look at where the weaknesses are, as well as the strengths. often it's historic, and we're in this position, but it's important that we do it because you're not going to change unless you do. On particular fields that I feel we need to look at and acknowledge is that we don't have our own green spaces team. We're the only district in the whole of Cambridgeshire that doesn't have one and doesn't do anything. And it has affected basically how we've obtained land, how we've done work on land in the last 50 years since the organisation. I don't know exactly when. I think it was abandoned, but I'm not sure the exact history of it. But for whatever reason, there is no one. And that's a weakness, and I think it needs to come out. You could say what the priorities are and why we got to that position, but it will be important, particularly because it's linked to another thing, that we're coming up to reorganisation. And that would be within the 5-year period of the report. So one does need to think how this might be taken on beyond reorganisation, should it happen. We assume it's going to happen, but obviously at this stage we can't be 100% sure. And we will then be in a new organisation with new structures, which will include a lot of land, which will need to think about how you manage that. And so you will need to be thinking ahead about how you do that. And I think that needs to be tackled in the report at some point. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Well, it's an interesting point. Well, several interesting points there. I think with our reorganisation of local government, I think our instructions are to continue as if that is not going to happen, but I suppose it would be perhaps not using all available information if we completely ignore because something is going to happen, and the better we can be prepared for that. Even if only in our minds, I think that's a good observation. Can we note those helpful suggestions from
Yeah,
Councillor
we'll
Khan,
make
I
sure
think?
that we include that. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on the report? Oh, so Councillor Redrup.
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking at the Appendix C, which gives the instructions on how to put together the report, and it mentions there's sort of 3 required elements, and then there's a range of optional information that can be added. I just wondered what was your plan with regard to that, because some of it looks like very interesting things that our residents might be interested in, sort of like what are our top achievements and how have the policies and actions helped. So I was just interested to know what you were thinking on that.
Yeah, I think we'd like to include information which strengthens the picture about our ability to discharge the biodiversity duty and that correctly frames and sort of helpfully frames our ability to work in this area and kind of what shapes our work in this area. If there's anything that you think would be particularly helpful to include within that, then we're more than happy to include that. And if it would be helpful for residents to understand a bit more about, or indeed parish councils or anything like that, then we're happy to consider including that in the report. And yeah, anything which sort of helps to frame yeah, how we're able to deliver this work.
Okay, thank you. What would be the best way to feed that sort of information into you?
Feel free to email me directly, or you can email the Climate and Environment inbox. But yeah, I'm happy to take any suggestions directly.
Thank you.
Okay. Unless there are any other points we make, so hopefully we've noted those inputs, and the other recommendation is for us to note the timescale for this, and I think Ellie, you already covered that, but there's a statutory duty to report back. Is it 12 weeks after the ending of the statutory period? I think sort of takes us into the beginning of next year, and I noticed we've got some recognition of that in our forward programme and agenda. We'll be able to just revisit it then before it actually gets signed off. So that's great. Can we then, members, acknowledge our duty, acknowledge some of the inputs we've had? Okay, we have, yes, apologies, Councillor Warren Green. I hadn't noticed your hand is up. Could we perhaps hear your input
All I wanted to say is I just want to say thanks to Ellie, because I'm here like overlooking this. And this is no mean feat to get this together. And I think it's great to have these comments coming in, which will only enrich it. But the amount of background papers that have gone into this, the development that's happened since 2019, which is a long time ago on this, and it's all really coming together now. And I think, you know, this is it's a really good sign that we can pull it all together and you know, enrich it with those comments. But you know, well done, Ellie, and thanks very much for your hard work. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, could I echo that then? So we have quite a short agenda item that sort of disguises sort of the 7/8 or whatever it is below the waterline of this iceberg of a piece of work. So thank you very much. So with that then, perhaps we could now take the recommendation, we acknowledge the statutory duty, extra comments brought by the committee, and to note the timescale. So could we have that by agreement? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. So the next agenda item is agenda item 6, which is update on biodiversity net gain, I think. So, and actually, is this combined with the local nature recovery strategy is a separate agenda item? Is that correct? So you're just updating us before we get into that with biodiversity net gain. So, John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I plan to do a short presentation, which I'll share on screen, on biodiversity net gain and where we are now after a year on, and then hopefully segue seamlessly into talking about the LNRS, the Local Nature Recovery Strategy, and we'll see where we get to, I guess, with questions. So let me share my screen firstly. And okay, fingers crossed the technology works. Okay. Everybody sitting comfortably. Okay. So, as I said before, this is really just an update for members on biodiversity net gain and where we've got to in the last year since it was became mandatory essentially last year. So, just remind ourselves, what is biodiversity net gain? Start at the beginning, perhaps. Assuming my computer will do what it's told. There we go. Okay. Bit of a time lag, apologies for that. So biodiversity net gain, in essence, seeks to, through the planning and development process, put back more than is taken or more than is lost through that development process. It's stepping into nature recovery as opposed to simply trying to mitigate for what's been lost and putting a sticking plaster on top of the damage to the natural environment that occurs when we have development. And so this is it is a change in the way that things have been done previously. Starting last year, we had the Environment Act mandating 10% above baseline. Prior to that, we lived in a very different world where we were just seeking to do what we could to mitigate for the loss. But net gain seeks to go beyond, and in doing so, it seeks to actually create new habitats, which sounds a bit counterintuitive, but that's the purpose behind net gain. And of course, for us in Greater Cambridge, in South Cambs, this is incredibly important. We live in a very dynamic landscape. The district surrounds a historic city hub, 800-year-old university, burgeoning biomedical campus. We've got new developments in the district, new towns. It's incredibly busy from a planning development perspective and incredibly dynamic. And so having something like biodiversity net gain in policy with regulations, I think helps us to create the kinds of places that people would hopefully want to live and benefit, and not just the people, but the nature as well. So, putting it simply, just to imagine in your head, if this is your green field, let's call it a green field, shall we? And this is your development footprint. In the past, no net loss, the old model, sought to simply put back what was taken. And of course, that never worked for a number of reasons. The way that things were measured, calculated, developers maybe not always playing ball, perhaps. So that was the no net loss model. And it used to essentially arrive at a net loss. And what net gain does is it seeks to not just put back what's lost, but add a little bit on top. In this case, 10%. That 10% is what the government have mandated as of the Environment Act 2021, which came in, actually became the secondary legislation, came into force last year. So we've now had a year to see how this is working its way through the planning system. And it's not all good, it's not all bad, it's a combination of both. We've had some challenges, but I think we've turned a corner. All major plan permissions granted in England from last February, February 2024, should have delivered 10% above baseline net gain. Miners came in April, and we've all been waiting for the NSIPs, the nationally significant, strategic, I always get that wrong, infrastructure projects to come into force, and I think we're on target for next May. There's currently a consultation going through the government, but it's looking like that won't be delayed, and NSIPs will have net gain as of next year. As we've already heard, we've got an enhanced duty for LPAs to conserve and enhance biodiversity, and the report that Ellie's just discussed is part of that enhanced duty. We need to report on all manner of things. And of course, and I'm going to come to this a little bit later, we've got the LNRS, the Local Nature Recovery Strategy, will introduce a new duty. There'll be a new material consideration for planning applications when that LNRS comes in, because it's an important part of the new evidence base for biodiversity. Excuse me. So there are some exemptions. If you've got 100% concrete everywhere, obviously there's no uplift because there's no B&G there in the first place. So sealed surfaces don't really count, they're exempt. Householder, small scale, also exempt. Custom build up to 9 dwellings. There are de minimis thresholds of less than 25 square metres, less than 5 metres of hedgerow, etc., etc. The point here is that there are exemptions to B&G. It's not a blanket policy. There are some exemptions which, wouldn't you know, some folk are finding interesting ways around their planning applications by so Section 73 would be one, which I'll talk to a little bit later also. But on the whole, we're finding that developers are following the new regulation. It's been a little bit slow, to be honest, in terms of the uptake, but this might just be because the guidance from DEFRA wasn't particularly clear last year, and so there were different interpretations of what could be done and what couldn't. One area that has caused a little bit of confusion is the overlap between biodiversity net gain and green infrastructure. I've tried to highlight this here. So for B&G, for instance, we can see that it does things like it ensures a net increase in biodiversity. It's mandated by specific regulations and policies. It focuses on measurable outcomes involving the creation of habitat and restoration for biodiversity. And of course, it requires monitoring. If we look at green infrastructure, the kind of things that we'd imagine would form part of any good quality planning application, we're looking at semi-natural features, a broader focus on perhaps ecosystem services, sustaining urban development and planning, and including greening initiatives like parks, roofs, green roofs and street trees. But if we were to look at this and perhaps conceptualize this as a Venn diagram, what we can see is that actually these things are not mutually exclusive, that they both deliver, and perhaps this is where the confusion has come. They both deliver, for instance, ecological enhancements, habitat creation, sustainable development is a goal, multifunctional landscapes, and improved ecosystem services. So hopefully that helps to clear up some of the confusion between GI and BNG. I suspect it will rage on beyond this meeting, though. What about our parishes in South Cambs? I made a short list here of the kind of impacts on parishes, both challenges and opportunities, of course, because within the district, what have we got? We've got about 101 parishes, I think, last count. I might be wrong by a couple there. But we're talking about collaboration with the local planning authority and developers, talking about parishes having their own biodiversity strategies. We're talking about having a key advisory role in planning matters. They already do, but BNG just enhances that. And so it's important to recognise that, yes, this is a planning lever, it's a planning tool, but it will affect all of our parishes one way or another. So far, you might ask me, okay, so what's happened so far? What have we done? So decisions up to April 2024, that should be 2025, my apologies for the typo there. We've had 12 major developments, 4 general industry storage warehouse developments, 5 change of use developments, and 72 minors. And for these, 93 applications, the BNG, statutory BNG condition was applied to these. And so it is having an effect. It's been a slow uptake. It's not been the cliff edge that we all imagined it would be. It's been more of a slow burn, but it's embedding now, and it's not going away. We don't think it's going away. I'll say a little bit about that later on. In terms of how we're delivering BNG, there are different models. We can deliver on-site, we can deliver off-site, or we can deliver through a combination of both. There are challenges and opportunities for all of these different models, and so really probably the sweet spot is doing a combination where you do some improvements on-site in keeping with your GI obligations, but then you also take maybe some of your BNG mitigation to a habitat bank where it has a better chance because there are perhaps fewer cats, fewer dogs, and kids with balls. Not that we don't love all of those things, but they're not always conducive to an uplift in biodiversity. I'm sure you understand that practical point. So in terms of off-site, we do have now, I can report, just over half a dozen BNG off-site sites in, actually all of these are in the district of South Cambs. They're all now sealed under Section 106, 30-year legally binding agreements. That's 159, I wish it was 159,000. It's not, it's 159 hectares of habitat which has been created or is planned to be created across these sites. And so we're trying to facilitate landscape level mitigation. The picture on the bottom right there of the screen is, that's Low Valley Farm just outside Fulbourn. It looks like a field of crops. What they're doing there is they're planting ryegrass. They'll take that ryegrass away at the end of the season, and with it, a lot of the nutrients that were in the soil. And so that's part of the management strategy, to strip the nutrients from the soil and prepare it for a wildflower mix. So this is happening as we speak. We have, as I've said, these are the locations of, I think there are now 7 of these sites, and we have facilitated. Obviously, we don't control the sites. They are bought to, you could call it a market, by entities such as the County Council, private sector, ENGOs like the Wildlife Trust, and others. And so there's no particular thematic area or sector, sorry, I should say, that has an optimum monopoly on this. We're seeing, private sector, government, and NGOs all at the table, which I think is healthy. So these are our sites. I keep calling them our sites, sites within our jurisdiction. And the reason it's important where they are is because that aligns with the strategically significant local nature recovery priority areas. This is a bit misleading now because I've now put up a map of the county boundary. So of course South Cambs is in the south, and in the south you'll see that green area there is the Cambridge Nature Network. The dark green area to the, I guess, to the west is the West Cambridgeshire Hundreds, and both of those are areas within our jurisdiction where these habitat banks are being created. So they do align with what's happening at the LNRS level and the work that's being taken forward by other partners like the Wildlife Trust and others. It's important to say that they're not just dotted around willy-nilly. I won't talk through this in great detail, but this is just an example, an off-site BNG site in Greater Cambridge, Low Valley Farm. This was the first to come forward. Some of you visited, I think it was last year, 140 hectares of land that they are turning from, essentially from monoculture into what should be, in a few years, a fabulous resource for biodiversity. This is one, so that's the County Council. This is another towards the southeastern area, Yenhall Farm. This is owned and managed by a company called Ground Control. And again, doing something very similar. And then finally, just as an example, this is the Wildlife Trust, have a small site, flag field, close to Fulbourn. So what we're seeing essentially is a market that's developing. We're seeing providers come forward, and our role as an LPA is to support them, but also to act as, I guess, to act in a way that we offer peer review of what they're suggesting. So this is why our ecology team are so important, because otherwise we could have providers turn up and say, well, we're going to do this, we're going to plant 400 trees, and all kinds of magical stuff. Our ecology team, before the Section 106 agreements are signed, go out there on the ground, boots on the ground, and check that what they're proposing is deliverable before we do anything, before we sign anything. So that's our role, if you like. We have had some challenges, early issues with biodiversity net gain. There was a loophole, self and custom build loophole, if you like to call it that, whereby the guidance from DEFRA was just unclear. On one hand, self and custom build was exempt, but under the MPPF, it still said you need to deliver net gain. And I think our residents got a little bit confused. The difference from the DEFRA guidance really wasn't there, and so we were sort of making it up on the hoof. We've now sorted that out, and we've got clarity into that particular situation. Delivery of BNG on small sites, again, extremely challenging, particularly if you're looking to purchase biodiversity credits and they cost £40,000. Maybe you've not factored that into your budget. So again, small site delivery has been challenging. And associated with that, partial unit sales. If you do need maybe 0.2 or 0.3 of a unit to offset the damage, we did have trouble initially with providers offering that. That's now changed, and you can purchase partial units. So the market's adjusted. I should say up front, we do not control that market. It's a free market. The council has absolutely no say on what the providers, once they've set up, how they sell their units, how they price their units. So that's the model that we have. Current issues, retrospective Section 106, Section 73A loophole. So this loophole allows developers to essentially start doing the work before the planning application comes in, and then retrospectively put the application in, and somehow forgetting they need some kind of B&G in there, which is very, very naughty. And we have seen a couple of these, but again, we have a good ecology team, and they are pursuing with some vigour those applications who do not present with biodiversity net gain, because that's not right, shouldn't be happening. And just finally on challenges, the monitoring Section 106 agreements, we've now got, as I said, about half a dozen 106 agreements with off-site providers, but of course there's an awful lot of B&G happening on-site as well. And as a local planning authority, we need to have a robust method of tracking that and ensuring that it's in place and it's monitored and managed. It's much easier to do it at the larger sites. which is one of the practical reasons why the larger sites are attractive, but obviously there will be B&G delivered on site in many locations too. So just my last few slides here. So where we're heading, there are currently 2 government consultations out on B&G, which close on 24th of July. One is on NSIPs and the other is on minor, medium and brownfield sites. And there's been a lot of chatter in the press about this consultation. I won't go into detail here, but we are reasonably confident that whatever comes out the back end will not significantly affect the work that we do to deliver biodiversity net gain within the district. There may be some tweaks. Some of them will probably help us and our residents, and some of them maybe not. At the moment, we just don't know. But we don't anticipate any significant changes to the way that we are managing this lever through the planning process. B&G on NSIPs, still on track, as I said, for May next year. As I've already said, some of the proposals to streamline B&G for small sites include gardens, for instance, in the calculations would be welcome, but still some questions about if B&G should apply to some sites at all, probably less welcome, but we shall see. And an LNRS map. And this is, I'm going to speak next about the LNRS, but the reason this is important and the reason it links to B&G is that from the perspective of the planning service, biodiversity net gain is the main tool that we have to influence and to feed into the local nature recovery strategy. So they're closely linked. This is a screenshot. The report which I sent round had a link to this online map that the LNRS has produced. And it looks a little bit scary because it looks as if most of the district is covered in one form of thematic area or another. Now, this is an opportunity map. And I won't go into a great deal of detail here. It's important to say that this map, along with the LNRS narrative, will hopefully start public consultation in just over a week's time. And then public, council, everybody can have a great deal, hopefully, of input into that LNRS and get it into good enough shape to bring it back to the local planning authorities at the end of the year for final approval. The LNRS does have overlap. This is probably where members are, and I think this is my last slide, have particular interest because, of course, we are in the middle of developing a new local plan. So we've looked at this as a planning team. The areas that the LNRS might influence would include developing an evidence base for biodiversity, informing a spatial strategy for site selection, supporting the delivery of B&G, etc., etc. These are all quite important thematic areas. However, I can report that we have been working very closely with our policy colleagues and that these overlapping thematic areas, I've used the term harmonised. I was trying to think of a better term, but essentially, just to give an example, the evidence base that the local plan is calling upon is aligned with the evidence base that the LNRS has developed. And so we don't have two parallel processes which are not connected. They're connected through the various meetings and the various other strategies that we put in place. And so I'll maybe speak a bit more to that a little bit later, but that's the end of that B&G presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John Cornell. So, members, do we have some questions for John? Oh, Councillor Bhattacharya, thank you.
So the government recently said it wants to make things easier for small business. I mean the house makers, the builders, with much simpler rule and land money planning, etc., etc. So my question is that how will South Cambridgeshire district make sure its diversity net gain B&G rules also work well with the small scale house makers, builders? And how will council support the people building personalized house, custom made house, who who often may not use the standard designs or procedure, might be difficult for them to it will be difficult for them to follow the BNG rules.
Okay.
I mean, for the I'm very sorry. My question is for the small builders. How can we help them?
Okay. Question there for you, John. I think how can we make sure that BNG covers small building projects, which I think you noted was a particularly challenging aspect of this.
Thank you. I'm not sure I got all of those questions. I think there was more than one, wasn't there? And perhaps.
Right. Do you want to ask the other two? I think were firstly, how do we ensure BNG we're meeting our obligations on a larger scale? Was that the first part of your question?
Yeah, I mean, how does South Cambridgeshire District Council intend to align its BNG policies planning process to ensure that the small developers are not disproportionately burdened by its complexity or the cost? In particular, how will the council support custom-built houses which often fall outside standardized approaches and may face unique challenges in following the requirements, BNG requirements? How will council can support the small builders? This is a question.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Councillor Bhattacharya. So I think that's really one question with some aspects to it.
I'll try. So perhaps the first thing to say is that we're just not sure what's going to come out of the government consultation, but the points that you've made have come up as questions within that consultation. And so I don't have a crystal ball, but I would imagine that some of the barriers that we've seen in the current legislation will be removed or amended to make life easier for the kinds of residents that you've mentioned. I would say, though, that custom build is currently exempt. There's an exemption under custom build. I mentioned it in my presentation. That the trick or the problem that we've had is when developers present as custom self-build, but actually it's not. It's them seeking the loophole, and that has happened in our district. So I think what we're seeing is we're seeing residents who genuinely want to do a self-build, and for that, we're not asking them to, they're exempt. There is no problem with that. But we're also seeing developers saying it's custom build, So there's a couple of different things, but the legislation, I'm hoping, will provide us with more clarity on that going forward.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Sandford.
Thank you. Just to follow up on John's comments there, a large percentage of the application we're seeing at planning committee these days are for custom self-build, and I think we'd really appreciate some steer, some guidance on each application as to whether you think it's a genuine custom build or whether, as you say, someone's trying to game the system. And I appreciate it probably has to be done subtly through the planning officers, but it is something we're struggling with. So thank you for that.
I can speak to that briefly. Last year, we looked at this challenge. The view was, and I think the view still is, that if residents are bringing forward single dwelling, custom build, single dwelling, self-build, then there's absolutely no problem. And I think even if it's two dwellings, if it's something small, community focused, something like that, we're not chasing them for mandatory BNG. We're asking them to do enhancements if they can, but we're very much taking a let's work with you approach. But it's when you get small developers coming forward and they're saying, well, we've got 9 custom builds in a row along the street. So that seems to be the benchmark that we're going to. 1 or 2 genuine, you can usually read between the lines. More than that probably needs greater clarity or greater oversight. But, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Rixon.
Thanks, Rob. Oops. Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, so I'll stagger them and see how we got on. So thanks for the presentation, John. That was really helpful. You mentioned, I know you might have picked this up already, I might have missed it, but the self-custom build loophole was the NPPF. You deciding which one was correct? Was it the NPPF or the policy? I just wanted to know, you're into the stage, which one led on that? So that's the first one.
Okay, so you want to have a go at that first?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so this is the knot that we tied ourselves in last year, because we had conflicting guidance in the policy. NPPF saying you shall deliver net gain, although no percentage given, and the new 10%. And so the view that we came to was that ecological enhancements are good enough for single dwelling self-build coming along. I mean, we're talking about very low level stuff. We're not talking about purchasing credits and spending tens of thousands of pounds. Just, enhance the landscape that you're developing in a way that probably you'd want to anyway. So, not pushing against an open door or anything, but it really came to the point where we were essentially looking at, is this a single, is it a family trying to do something? Or is it, again, a commercial developer turning up, trying to label it as a custom build or a self-build, and just trying to squeak underneath the regulation? But as things stand, you mentioned NPPF, we are happy with enhancements, ecological enhancements for custom and self-build, if they are genuinely custom and self-build, not if they're developers showing up and saying, well, this is what we have. So there's a bit of a nuance, but as I said earlier, hoping that the guidance from DEFRA that comes out of the consultation will clarify that particular area.
Amazing. Okay, excellent. I'll group the next two. So I'm interested to know, so obviously you can offsite, you get BNG offsite. So I was interested to know how the sites came forward, the sites within South Cambs, sort of how they came forward themselves, and so the mechanism behind that. And I'm also interested to know, I know we're not in control of the market, but I'd be very interested to know the range of costs of units that you're seeing.
Okay, so it is set up as a free market by the government. In terms of the providers who came forward with sites, we initially saw some landowners that just sort of had an odd field here and there that they were looking to make some money off, perhaps. But there were criteria, and there are criteria. So, for instance, there's a minimum size of 40 hectares if you're going to set up a site, unless you are proximate to an existing wildlife site or an existing reserve, and therefore could be considered as an extension. And in fact, the Wildlife Trust sites are significantly smaller than 40 hectares, but they happen to be adjacent to Fulbourn Fen. Okay, so that's how that works. Providers turning up and essentially bringing to the table opportunities that are credible because they meet the criteria set out by Natural England. They've had a visit from our ecology team and their plans stack up. And then it's up to them, because obviously it's a commercial risk as much as anything else. If you're going to set up a site and start selling credits, you need to know that there's going to be customers out there to buy your units. And then to your last point, which is that the price, initially the price for a unit was about £40,000, which seems quite high, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what the current rate is, because it will fluctuate, and it will fluctuate in a way that we have absolutely no control over. We are passengers on that particular piece there. But I think now that we have 7 sites in South Cambridgeshire, all offering different types of habitat to mitigate, then you're bound to see competition, which is a good thing. I can't, however, give you today a list of the exact prices. Some of it's commercially sensitive. So, for instance, some of our off-site providers will just tell us, well, this is what we're charging. Others will be a bit more cagey. So it's not an area that we've particularly gone into. And there's a very good reason for that, which is that as a local planning authority, we cannot, and we shouldn't be seen to be recommending developers go to a particular site. So what we can, and what we are going to be doing is we're going to be displaying, we're going to have a web map pretty soon with these sites on that, you know, you can click on and scroll around and link to their website, but we can't promote one over another. That would be seen as unfair. So it's an interesting position to occupy. Yeah.
Okay. And then how they, I said, how they say verified or monitored, is that Natural England? Is that?
So there's a B&G register. If a site wants to set itself up as a commercial operation, it needs to register with DEFRA and Natural England and get essentially a license number. It's a few £100 to do that. But yeah, so it's a regulated, this is the thing about biodiversity net gain, it's highly regulated, it's measurable, it's locked into legally binding agreements for 30 years. It would be difficult to try and imagine a system that wasn't, or that didn't have the kind of checks and balances that this does without it being too burdensome. Because obviously we don't, you know, we don't want this to be a barrier. We want it to be a facilitator for a better natural environment. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then I'll wrap up with the last two, which is, you mentioned you were wondering whether small sites could include gardens. Was that for sort of both sides of the calculation? Well, sort of the pre-development and then the post-development and the provision of BNG, so including the area of gardens. And then the second part is on-site enforcement and reporting. How is that carried out? Is that through the planning enforcement, or is that another mechanism? And then for how long? If BNG is provided on site, how long is that? Is that 30 years as well? It's expected to remain in place.
Got some great questions. I'll just say that. I will try. So the last question is the easiest. Within the Section 106 agreement, we stipulate that we will essentially visit the sites across the 30-year window in years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. And the purpose of that visit will be to check that the habitat is in fact doing what it should do. If it's not, then there's a legally binding obligation on part of the provider to replant the habitat. And if it dies again, they have to redo it. So, this is what the 106 does. It essentially ensures that over 30 years, the habitat, because they're selling those credits, they're selling the credits on the market, the habitat created that they are selling as units actually ends up being what it should be, what it said in the report that they provided. So we perform that site visiting function. We check through their reports also in those monitoring years. And the reason it's front-loaded with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, obviously, is they're the most important years in terms of habitat establishing and ensuring that it's actually doing what it does. Then every 5 years. So that's the easy part of the question. The more difficult one, I think, was about small sites. Could you please repeat that?
Yeah, so the first part, you mentioned in your presentation the small sites might include gardens in that BNG calculation.
Yeah, so currently, vegetated gardens do not count. And this has caused all kinds of headaches. However, I think, and I'm not sure, that within the consultations currently underway, that is going to be fixed. It's going to be amended to make things easier, more transparent, and less of a headache for residents. I would say, though, if you can imagine, here we are in July 2025. BNG dropped a year ago. As I've said, we've got half a dozen offset sites out there in the district. And I've explained our monitoring. We've got the full-time 3 ecologists on our team to monitor those sites. As time goes on, as the years go on, all the B&G which is being included on site at tens and then hundreds and eventually then thousands of different locations across the district is going to provide us with something to think about in terms of how we resource the monitoring and the enforcement. So that's a different question, and at the moment I don't have an answer for you. And I'm sure that's a head scratch that's happening up and down the country, because it's we need to ensure that what they're saying they're doing. How we monitor that is a different matter. And in fact, I mean, monitoring is a whole other resource question when it comes to our green infrastructure and our B&G.
So, does that mean that could people report if you saw a site where you didn't feel that the B&G was being implemented, for example?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a really good point. We already rely on our parishes in ways that go above and beyond to report when things shouldn't or aren't as they should be. We see this with TPOs. We see this with all kinds of other areas which should have been delivered through Section 106, which are dead or dying or never went in. So our parishes are our eyes and ears, and we absolutely need to capitalise on that as a really important source of intelligence, but to work dynamically, with our parishes to ensure that we do something when we're informed about it and that we act on that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rickson. Councillor Martin Khan.
The size 40 hectares, and you said that it's you're going to have smaller sites virtually adjoining an existing reserve. Does the overall size then still have to be 40 hectares, or how rigid is that? Or can you adopt smaller sites? I'd heard, I think mentioned last time that there was negotiations going on, for instance, for the Longmeadow field and set aside in Impington and Bishopston, but then they're below 40 hectares, so there's that site. So I wondered how you're managing that. Can you have smaller sites when there are existing reserves that you're improving and restoring? I just wondered how that works in practice. And the second thing, I was simply going to comment that about the gardens. I can see the difficulties in including gardens, because you can do almost anything with your garden without planning permission, and how would you enforce it? And I think it was an understandable, pragmatic response. So if you're going to, you have to think very carefully if you're extending it to gardens, perhaps only on large gardens, on particular cases. But I can see the difficulties. So just a comment.
I'll have a go at answering that one. I'm not sure I can give you a definitive answer, in as much as some of the stuff we're still working out, which sounds like a bit of a get out, but it isn't. It's because planning and development is so much about context. And so the site you mentioned in Histon is very small indeed. Interestingly though, it is adjacent to a water feature, which is interesting because we don't have much in the way of water credits for fresh water. And it's not just a sort of, a square plonked in the middle of an otherwise landscape devoid of. Yes, but in terms of the rules around, say rules, it's probably more guidance. But again, I think this is something that we're going to see out of the consultation, clarity in areas that we've struggled to come up with, because some of this stuff has been. Some of the uncertainty has been placed on local planning authorities to just go and work it out. And that's where we are now, Councillor Calmer, at a point where some of it's worked out very well, but there are still questions. So in a way, the consultation which is currently underway is going to help us to provide more clarity. And hopefully, next time I see you, I can have a fuller answer for you. But yes, the size of the site, I don't think there is a magic number, but 40 hectares is the number that I've seen published. In terms of back gardens, yes, absolutely, that would be a wonderful development if we can include those in the calculations.
Thank you, John. Councillor Rickson, you had a further question.
Yeah. Sorry, John. I think it's just one more. You might be able to answer this, and yeah, feel free to tell me if you can't. But I was curious to know, is this liability? So you mentioned that the at one stage the cost of the unit was £40,000 for a BNG unit. Is this liability something that's now being stated in financial viability reports for when justifying not delivering social housing and planning applications? Is this something that's come through? Does that question at all make any sense? Or?
I'm not sure it does. Let me explain the model. That £40,000 is, let's call it £40,000. That's the fee that the provider, so let's say it's the county council is the provider, are assessing their biodiversity units at for Low Valley Farm. Let's just say that. Yeah. So we don't have any liability in terms of financial liability when it comes to the provider. Yeah.
Yeah. So apologies. Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, so if we've got sites coming forward with for residential development, and in that, if they're not hitting the required delivery or the required percentage of social housing, and that's often justified with a financial viability statement. I was wondering if there was evidence or knowledge if this new liability to provide BNG, is that being included in that as sort of as a cost?
Can't answer that question. I just don't have an answer for that. Interesting question, but it's not one I have an answer on. Apologies.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think that is a very interesting question. I don't know. Maybe we could get some answers on that sort of outside of this meeting, and perhaps get Councillor Rickson an answer to that. Yes, thank you very much. Oh, yes. Yeah.
I've got a couple actually of little questions. The first one is, in the BNG guidelines and requirements, is there anything around climate resilience? So looking to species and habitats in 20, 30 years' time, if it's a 30-year commitment, is there anything that has to be considered in terms of climate resilience in that?
An example would be species selection. So an example might be species selection.
Yeah.
I can't say there is. You want the right trees in the right place, but that's across the board. That factors into all of the work that we do. If providers are undertaking habitat creation, then that habitat creation should be appropriate. It should be made up of native species, and of course there's some wiggle room there, isn't there? Because what do we mean by native species? Is a sycamore native? We could get into that whole discussion about when the channel closed. No, I'm not going down there, but I understand your point. I would say, not to duck the question, but I would say with the climate changing in the way that it is, the dangers are not so much about whether they're planting oaks or ash, it's whether they're actually maintaining them correctly, because what we're seeing is an awful lot of die-off because trees are planted but they're not maintained regularly, they're not maintained properly, they're not watered, they're not mulched, and so that, I think that would be a bigger risk if we're going to talk about risk. And again, not to duck your question, but yeah.
Thank you. The second one was whether there was a kind of like-for-like need. So if one habitat was being developed, is there a need for the same type to be incorporated in the biodiversity net gain, so that to, I guess, avoid lack of habitat diversity, or is there no kind of requirement to replace habitat?
Well, there are trading rules, so you have to follow the trading rules that are set out by DEFRA and Natural England around biodiversity net gain. But in terms of like for like, probably the closest it gets is if you're doing harm in one of the priority habitat areas, let's say the fens, if you're removing fen landscapes, but then you're mitigating on chalk, then you're probably not following the guidelines to the T, because you're not replacing what was lost. You're doing some good work, but it might not be replacing, which is why we really benefit from having offset sites which are scattered around. So some of those sites that I showed earlier are on clay, others are on chalk. We do need freshwater sites as well, hence mentioning Histon. But I think broadly speaking, yes, like for like, but specifically habitat for habitat, I think that would be too much of a constraint to really apply to the model. Okay.
Yes, Councillor Martin Kahn.
It's just this information really in terms of how the BNG metric is calculated. This point from Mrs. Vaudin commented on it about the climate strategy. One of the elements which are important on these sites for climate is the soil conditions, because a large amount of the carbon is tied up in the soil. And as you were commenting about short grassland, you need hundreds of years to create the soil there. I think of Lullington Nature Reserve, which in Sussex, for instance, where after 100 years of cultivation, an area was restored, and it's completely different from the areas around. It takes years and years to get the soil conditions similar, because you've got a cultivated soil there. Now, when you're calculating the BNG, I mean, there's clearly some habitats are much better at recreating soil carbon, soil humus, building up carbon in the soil. For instance, fen soils, I would imagine, generally rapidly recover carbon as they build up material, and some other ones are not. Is that taken account in the calculations? How is it measured? How are they valued?
I'm not going to get into how the Deframetric calculates this. We'd be here all day. It's incredibly complicated, which is why we need trained ecologists to do it and interpret the outputs, and in fact ensure that the inputs are correct. So I think your broader point, though, about recognising carbon sequestration across a variety of different habitat types is a good one. People always think about trees, planting trees, but in fact there are types of grassland and soils which hold far more carbon in them than trees. So I think I would perhaps just jump on that larger point that when we're thinking about climate resilience within the council and we're thinking about mitigation, we can perhaps broaden the scope to think beyond trees, perhaps.
Thank you. Yes, good point. Okay, could I just squeeze one? In terms of the NSIP, we've got a few NSIPs in the pipeline in South Cambs. When the new legislation comes in next year, I think you said May next year, would that apply at the point of application or the point of approval?
I think it's a point of application, but I mean, notwithstanding that, what we've found, and I'm not going to mention the A14, but we have been talking to National Highways about the A428. And of course, we have East West Rail, which is going to come down the track. No pun intended, but the discussions we've had with Highways England about the A428 are encouraging, because they're telling us that they've learned lots and lots of lessons from what happened with the A14. So I suppose my answer is, even if it's not mandatory at 10%, we're seeing a lot of goodwill already from the providers, and in fact also from East West Rail making all kinds of promises about what they hope to deliver in terms of biodiversity net gain. And I think because of the types of developers that they are, they perhaps have more capacity to credibly deliver, when they get it right, meaningful net gain. So notwithstanding, it's still a few months away. I think we're not just keeping our fingers crossed, we're talking to them about what they're going to deliver, and hopefully about learning the lessons from the past and the A14 and the huge die-off, for which there was a very interesting article in The Guardian actually just at the weekend. But there we go.
Okay, thank you very much. So time's moving on, so unless there are any other questions, I think probably time to move on to the next item, if I may, which is also John. And before we start this item, which is going to be the clues in the title, Local Nature Recovery Strategy Approval for Public Consultation. So, and I think this is pointed up in the agenda write-up. But basically what we're doing in this item is approving, or giving our approval to Cabinet to approve the public consultation to go ahead, and that's really Natalie Warren-Green as Cabinet member would be approving this. And then just to underline that once that consultation goes ahead, we would then have an opportunity, obviously, to feed into that consultation. So I think we'll obviously have a question session after John's made his presentation, but at this stage, that's just because we can ask a few questions, and the objective is not to really second guess what might come up in the proper consultation. I think I've got that right, John?
Yes, Chair, absolutely, thank you. I do not have, so I see a hand here.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention, so yeah, it is, so it's coming to me after this. All I wanted to say was absolutely right. What we want to do is just go ahead with the consultation if we can. This went through CPCA meeting, and it was decided by that committee that it's ready for consultation. The timing is July, August time. What I'd like to do is, assuming that we will be advising to go ahead with the consultation, given that this work has taken a big body of people, over 18 months to work on. If we can push ahead with the consultation, what I would really like to encourage this committee to do, SEAC, is to encourage as many people as possible to consult, because it's a lot of work's gone into this. And so it'd be great if, people are aware of the consultation and can give as much time and attention to considering it as they can during the next 8 weeks. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps now over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be pleased to know I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I will just give a verbal update, and hopefully it will be a lot quicker than the last item. So, local nature recovery strategy. So LNRS is a new statutory plan. It's required under the Environment Act 2021. And an LNRS essentially agrees priorities for nature recovery and proposes actions in the locations where it would make a particular contribution to those priorities. A draft strategy has been prepared. It has taken 18 months to do that. We are not obviously the lead authority. The CPCA were the lead authority. That was delegated to the County Council. And so within Cambridgeshire, the supporting authorities, of which we are one, have been feeding into that process for the last 18 months through various meetings and workshops. The draft strategy, as we have, and it was included in the items on the agenda in terms of the attachments, essentially is two things. It's a narrative that explains what we're trying to do and where, and it's a map. Now that sounds pretty simplistic, because in fact what we've ended up with is quite a long two-part narrative and a series of maps, online maps in a map deck, which display the locations of our existing biodiversity resources, but also those areas where we could do more for nature. The process by which this LNRS has been developed has, as I've said, taken approximately 18 months. There have been 13 steering group meetings, input from 2 mapping workshops, habitat priority workshops, data evidence working group, prioritisation working group, ecologists working group, strategy writing working group. There have been public surveys already, general public responses numbering about 1,300, local groups and organisations from 40 different places, and priority shortlists of involving about 400 responses to what was being proposed. The current timeline, as set out by the CPCA, is that we have, beginning on the 18th of July, a public consultation period of 8 weeks, which, if all of the supporting authorities agree to move this forward, which I hope they will, that public consultation will begin. And at the end of that public consultation, there'll be essentially a second round of approval. It will come back to the council, to the councils, with a 28-day supporting authority approval. So there are lots of opportunities here for the public to feed into this process and comment, but also for members to take a view and to steer the guidance and to steer the content within the LNRS. The goal date is December this year to publish this by the Secretary of State, or perhaps January if there's any kind of slight delay. It has been delayed for various reasons up until this point. I think it could be argued that there was a focus on detail for some time, which essentially it gummed up the process more than it probably should have had. But what we've ended up with is a document which has been looked at by specialists and shaped into something that we think is credible and that can be brought before members and taken to the general public. And so, on the table today, this committee is asked to either have no objection under the Regulation 9 of the Environment Act, Local Nature Recovery Strategy Procedure Regulations, that the content of the draft is fit to go out to public consultation and therefore to proceed, or by making an objection under the same regulation that it doesn't feel that this is the case and it needs further work before it can go. A pro forma letter has been sent and produced by, sent to us, produced by CPCA, and essentially the committee is asked to advise the exec member, Councillor Warren Green, to essentially sign off this, this draft LNRS for public consultation. And so that's it. That's it. I would say there's an awful lot to read through. There are many pages and maps and pictures. But I think members should take note that it's not been thrown together. It's been a very long road, and we hope has produced something that's credible and ready to be put before the public.
Yes, thank you. Well, it certainly is a very impressive document, I think, and going to take us all quite a while to study it in detail. I'm not sure. I think, well, there probably is an opportunity for members here too, but I almost feel, I think we can make some observations if we'd like. I don't think it would be really fair to start questioning, well, you know, how is this aspect or that aspect going to work? Because that would almost be preempting the consultation, I think. But so I think really we can make some observations, but I think it would be unfair to expect answers at this stage if we agree with that. So do we have any observations on? Yes, Councillor Khan.
Absolutely, you need to go ahead and consult on this. There's no problem about this. I have some comments, some of which I will make when the consultation period comes out. But there's one observation I want to make, which I think does need to be borne in mind. Looking at the legal background to it, it seems to meet all the legal requirements and the advice. But there is a concern that I have, which is to do with the implementation of this. It's a document, unlike a local plan, where you're finding policies on things which you don't necessarily have control over. I think it's important, not necessarily in the document itself, but at some point to have a document which looks at what is going to be expect to be delivered for certain. For instance, the Great Fen and the Wicked Fen, you should expect that to be delivered. It's got people behind it and resources are coming in. Look at what we're going to get from BNG. And then there's the balance, which what we don't have control of, is mainly going to be provided by agricultural support. And that needs monitoring. Are we going to achieve the anticipated doubling of nature by 2050, which is the objective? We need to keep on monitoring, and unless we've got data on that, and some idea about who's going to implement it, we won't be able to, we're just producing goodwill without a likelihood of achievement. And I think that is important. And as I said, I think it probably is a supplementary document that we need rather than, because in itself it's not something which we can be sure of. You know, these are estimates and guidance, and as information comes on, it will change. But But I think we do need to think about that, and I think that's an important consideration. In terms of the actual document, it's fine. It covers most of the things. There are one or two quibbles. In the southeast of our district, there's an area which they call the East Cambridgeshire sort of nature network, but including areas of woodland on the boundary, on the clay soils, boulder clay, clay with flint soils on the boundary with Essex and Suffolk, which in fact includes quite a lot of hornbeam woods, and they're not identified. And I think that's something we perhaps ought to identify as a feature, and may provide opportunity for ameliorating, and probably needs to be done in cooperation with the strategies in Suffolk and Essex, and I think that's a consideration that needs to be considered. But that's something, again, in consultation at a later stage. And the other query that I noted, which is of interest, is we've got the Cambridge Nature Network includes an area north between Histon and Cottenham and not there. And if you look at the opportunities, there's very few opportunities identified there. And that seems to be, it seems curious, put it that way. Comment, I don't quite know how they're going to achieve that 30% there, with the amount of opportunity areas indicated on the map. But I would love it if they can. It's an area that close to me. It's something that we're very keen. Just there's inconsistency there, that's all. So there's a couple of other minor comments, but those are, as you said, to come in the consultation stage.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Khan, any other observations from members? Councillor Sanford.
Not an observation, but given the tight timescale, unless Councillor Warren Green has any objections, I think we just agree to push this forward to consultation and listen to the public responses. And I didn't hear anything in Councillor Warren Green. Okay, she can speak for herself.
I just want to confirm, I don't have concerns about that. I think, you know, it's time we went ahead with this. The other authorities, as far as we know, are. If any of them decide not to, then obviously that will be fed back to us, and that might change things. But assuming everybody goes ahead, I think it'd be great to get it out there. It's a great piece of work, and it's taken a lot of time and effort, but it does really deserve to have a very strong consultation. So let's get that 8 weeks started and get people really commenting and feeding in what is really important to our region, because it's very important, as we all know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warren Green. So with that then, I think, well, add my congratulations to everyone who's been involved in, I mean, what's a substantial piece of work there in our district council and further afield. So perhaps we could now, do we need to do this formally by a vote, or can we do it by affirmation, do we think? Affirmation. Okay, well, if we can then go with the recommendation to take this forward, to recommend via Councillor Warren Green to Cabinet that we do take this forward. Can we take that by affirmation then? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. So we've agreed to recommend to Cabinet that we proceed with a consultation for the local nature recovery strategy, approval for public consultation. So, just trying to find my place back in the agenda. We have now a compendium report, I think, which, Rebecca, are you going to, maybe Grace and Rebecca? Thank you.
Hi. Yes, so it's going to be a bit of a double act between me and Grace, just to keep things interesting. Yeah. So I'll start, if that's okay. So there's 3 items in this compendium report, and the first one is just a bit of an update on, on the work that's been done recently with parish councils on the biodiversity duty. So, and some of you may know about this already, but in May we did hold a workshop webinar for parish and town councils in relation to the biodiversity duty and explaining, you know, how they can be involved and be compliant. And it was very well attended. It went very well, and Councillor Walters of Duxford Parish Council attended and gave their sort of first-hand account of doing biodiversity improvement within the village. and we did record the session, so it's there for future use if anyone that couldn't attend wanted to use it. But what the positive thing that came out of that workshop is that there's need to do more, and it, you know, there was that requirement. So we just wanted to flag that we think that there is scope for doing more. There's interest in doing more webinars of that for parishes, either just a repeat of what we did before. So we are sort of thinking about if we should host another session or do some other sort of regular form of communication for parish councils to encourage their work in this field. And but also there is scope for maybe doing something within our annual climate conference in November, although I appreciate that that conference is for a much wider audience, not just parishes. So there are different ways, but we basically got the message that there's an appetite for doing much more. And actually it kind of links back to some of the comments we got in from the conference last year about people needing a little bit more confidence and help getting a bit of a kickstart in developing local projects. So positive thing overall. I think we do more of it basically.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Redrup.
Thank you, Rebecca. I just wanted to comment that I attended that meeting and I agreed that it went really well, and it was really interesting to hear from Councillor Walters and the discussion that brought up amongst the parishes of all their different experiences and sort of trying to help each other. I just thought it was a really excellent initiative, and it is great that there's thoughts to continue with that sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Grace now for the next item.
I've just got some slides that I'm going to share for this, so let me just pull those up. There we go. So on June 17th, Climate Emergency UK released their third round of scoring for local authorities, covering questions relating to building and heating, transport, planning and land use, governance and finance, biodiversity, collaboration and engagement, waste reduction and food. So the data was collected in 2024 through a combination of volunteer research and FOIs, and then we had the opportunity to respond via right to reply in December 2024 following the initial scores. It's just worth noting, wow, this is a really useful exercise to see that we're on the right track with this new draft strategy, and also look at what other similar authorities are doing that is within our sphere of influence. There is a slight arbitrary element to the scoring in that work that isn't completed or completely finished or doesn't exactly meet the criteria isn't taken into account. So the average for district councils across the UK was 34%. We scored 39%. I think the initial release said 38, but our score is actually 39%, which is a really significant improvement of 5% from our previous score in 2023, which is really positive to see. Looking at local comparisons, Cambridge City Council scored 53%, East Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire 40%, and Fenland 60%. But as I mentioned, it's just worth noting that some work that was kind of underway at the time of scoring, which even now might be completed, wasn't taken into account for our score. So how we use the climate scorecards to add value to our work, we carried out a review of where marks were lost and where we have the opportunity to address these in the new climate and nature strategy. So we carried out a really in-depth review looking at, was it addressed? If not, could it be in the new climate and nature strategy? And if not, why not? And is it something that we just need to be cognizant of for the future? So the timing of the data collection, as I mentioned, did affect some of the results. For example, several marks were lost in the planning section, which hasn't taken into account future policies that will be proposed in the new local plan. A lot of work has been done around sustainable food since the scoring. And yeah, as I mentioned, some other local neighbouring councils received marks in areas that we now would. For example, our corporate plan wasn't finalised at the time of scoring, so we didn't receive marks for the following Does the council's corporate plan include a net zero target and make tackling climate emergency one of its main priorities, which of course it is. So just looking at some examples in a bit more detail, in buildings and energy, one of the questions was, are the homes owned and managed by the council energy efficient? We scored 1 out of 3 marks for this, so we dropped 2 marks, but this is a key area of the new draft nature and climate strategy, where we have a target to bring all council homes up to EPCC by 2030. So kind of meeting all areas of the criteria for that one. Some around governance and finance. Does the council have a sustainable procurement policy? We didn't score any marks for this question, but that's something that we're looking to develop and develop a set of sustainable procurement guidelines. And then another one, have all senior management and councillors in the cabinet or committee chairs receive climate awareness training? We received no marks for this question, although many staff have completed the carbon literacy training. We didn't receive marks for this because of the word all was in the criteria, so we scored 0 marks for that question. And then finally, transport, looking at quite an interesting one around air quality. So do the PM 2.5 levels in a significant proportion of neighbourhoods in the council's area exceed the Safe World Health Organization air pollution guidelines? We actually received penalty marks for this question, so we would deducted marks from our overall score. But if you look at all of the results, only 2% of councils didn't receive penalty marks for this question, and that's because it's really difficult to reach those World Health Organization standards, and the work of the Joint Air Quality Strategy will work towards reaching those eventually, and there's interim targets for 2029. Yes, that's everything.
Thank you. Have we reached point for questions now? Councillor Khan.
Well, to declare, I haven't noted it with interest that my brother-in-law was a member of Climate Emergency. He has, I think about a year now, he's no longer one, but any comment I make with that context.
Okay. Oh, I thought you would just declare an interest, or but no, just an observation. Yes.
I would comment on the 2.5 air quality. I suspect it will be very difficult for us ever to meet that, because we've got the A14 going through our area, and with the impact of all the traffic, there are going to be areas which are going to be affected. So we do our best, but until we've all got electric cars. No, and even then, I think there's a lot from tyres, so that may even then not be achievable.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bhattacharya.
Thank you. On your page, slide number 2, or I think slide number 3 something, where you are saying that mark lost. Can you please explain that bit? Is it data lost or mark lost? Like how, what are you explaining there?
I think that was the one around the air quality. So the way that they do it is for certain criteria, you'll be awarded marks if you do achieve positive action. But then for things around air quality, you're kind of negatively scored based on certain criteria. So you can be awarded. Yes. Yeah.
So do you have any kind of record of the bad air qualities? Can you give us the statistics as well?
Around the air quality?
Yeah.
Not to hand, but as I kind of mentioned, only 2% of councils, district councils across the UK didn't receive penalty marks for that question. And that's just a case of the criteria being set quite high. So I think air quality in general overall is good. It's just that the criteria is, such the way they set it.
Okay.
Thank you. I suppose there is an element in this of trying to set the bar high, and it is quite surprising though when you think of all the effort has gone in to making our housing stock and continuing effort on that. It's quite a big part of our focus in South Cambs, I think, and certainly must have consumed an awful lot of resource. But anyway, I guess we should take this in good humour and, you know, see if what it is the organisers are just trying to sort of ratchet it up incrementally. I'm sure we can come top of the table, you know, when we've finished all the good things that we have in train. So thank you for the report.
I have one final thing, if that's okay. I've got one final thing in the compendium report,
Yes.
and it's just a brief update on the development of the climate and nature strategy, which obviously is developing, and we have a draft of it now. And so since we last met, there's been a couple of steps that we've taken to help finalise the draft strategy before we go out to public consultation. And one of those was the employment of this officer sat next to me, hello Grace, to help with the development of the strategy exclusively and work on the consultation of it and the finalisation of it. And the second one is we've just appointed consultants who are called Bioregional, and what we wanted to do is get an external sort of view of the strategy, of the draft strategy, how it sits, get that kind of external objective take on it, get them to do a bit of a gap analysis, look at best practice from elsewhere, and draw on that for a bit of a comparison. Also look to the future and what other key national or local other documents might need to be reflected in our strategy that we hadn't picked up on, so a bit of a sense check there. So we've got a bit of a plan with Bioregional, and they've been progressing that work, and one of the you know, they have just completed some of the gap analysis. We're just waiting for the report on that. And one of the steps was also an internal stakeholder workshop to try and garner all the thoughts from the different departments within the council, which obviously we have been doing, but sometimes it helps to actually have everyone in the same room and have a proper conversation about it. So that happened last week, and so again we'll be meeting with the consultants this week just to pull of those thoughts together, which will then feed into the revised draft strategy. Because we've taken time to do that step in the development of the strategy, there is just a slight change of time frame. So the draft strategy will be coming to the September SEAC now, and the post-consultation final draft will be coming to the committee in January next year. So it's just all shifted slightly so we could do this little bit of extra work. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think this is one just to note, is it? I think, yes, just noting this report. So I guess we can take that by affirmation. We note the report. So thank you very much. So now forward plan and any other business. I guess we should do the forward plan first. Grace or Rebecca? We've actually just covered some forward plan there, but was there more? I don't know.
Yeah, there is a few. So looking ahead to September, so we do have the pre-consultation for the climate and nature strategy is on the agenda, we also have the annual review of our greenhouse gas emissions report. So Ellie will be bringing that. See how we are against our targets. And then also, where we're kind of at a key stage with our Zero Carbon Community Grant Scheme, and we've just had the applications back. So between now and September, we'll be communicating with you about who the successful applicants might be after we've done the evaluation. And then in September, we'll bring a summary of who's been awarded the funding. And then also in September, we will be coming to a key stage in the development of our retrofit guide, and there'll be an early findings report. So we'll be able to give you the headlines from that and let you know how the development of that guide is going and what it's likely to look like. So they're the key things in the forward plan for September.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I just ask, is the Zero Carbon Community Grant, is that going to the Grants Committee as previously, and
yes,
then I think in previous years SEAC members have been free to attend those meetings?
Yes, I think we're planning to repeat that kind of process, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. there any other comments in this section? I don't think so. So, so I think that brings the meeting to a close, does it not? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and look forward to seeing you next time. So, brings the meeting to a close at 15:40. Thank you very much, everyone.